Hey there, Tenere fans. I am ready to do my first oil change. I was fortunate enough to pick up this bike a few weeks ago and get enough miles on it, about 740, so I can do the first oil change. I'm a little over because it should be right around 600 miles, but she still has the dealer tag on it, which just makes me happy I've been able to get that many miles in already. Not a big deal to change the oil in your own motorcycle, and so what I would say is, open up your manual, take a look at it on page 6-11 and then in 12 and so on. It shows you how to do it. If you follow the instructions, not a lot of brain surgery here. Pretty easy to do. Biggest thing to know is what you're torquing at, let's see here, 32 pound-feet to put your drain bolt back on when you're ready to do that. And of course, how much oil and what filter do you need as well. I was able to order everything off of Amazon, of course, and so I've got the Yamaha filter. I've been a K&N fan, but I've been reading some reviews lately that that's not really the way to go. This is a very common filter to find. It's the 5GH13440-61, and it's made in Thailand, so that really makes it quality. And then Yamalube. Of course, I like to use Yamaha products for my Yamaha bikes, and I'm running 2050. I live in South Texas, and so this works out pretty good for me as well. Need about 2.75 quarts to do the change with the filter, and then I bought some crush washers. Also, always good to have these things on hand. You don't have to replace them every time, or at least I don't, until I feel like they're worn enough, and if I see any leaking, which I'm always good about checking and making sure before I get off on a long trip that I'm not having any even dripping as far as leaking goes. With all that being said, I'll go ahead and get started on changing the oil. The engine's been warmed up a little bit, knocked off a little bit of the dirt as well, and so we'll start getting this thing done. I thought I would mention that I work on a lot of different projects at once, and so I use a Microsoft OneNote to keep a work log of all of my vehicles. OneNote, I believe, is free on most formats. Great software, maybe a part of Microsoft Office, I'm not even sure, but I've used it for so long for everything in my life to keep things kind of organized. And here's the work log where I'm just starting off on the T700. So exciting for me to get the journey going. First things first, you just got to remove the 4 8mm bolts on the bash plate, unless you've got maybe an aftermarket bash plate. This is the standard bash plate. It is not going back on. With the bash plate removed, now we're ready to actually change the oil. So I got my oil drain pan here already. That oil didn't come out of this bike. And then I also have the drain bolt available to me. That's a 17mm. So very easy to take that off. I also have the filter right here that'll need to come off. Filters sometimes can be difficult to get off. In the past, I have used channel locks. I obviously destroy the filter when I do it, but of course it's not going back on. Or you can actually buy a tool that will do it for you or to help you with that. So this fits over perfectly at the end of the filter. I use this on a Goldwing and on my Super Tenere as well. And then you just use a 17mm socket to unscrew this. Pretty easy to do. I'm gonna go ahead and get that started now. I loosened it up enough to where it's just dripping, and now I'll just use my hand to take it off. I do it kind of slow just to make sure I don't get oil everywhere. I've already broken free the bolt, so it's on there pretty good. Like I said, 32 pound-feet, and I like to use my fingers. I don't want this to drop into the oil if I can at all avoid that. Probably ought to be using some gloves here, but I'm just too dang excited. Boop. And there she goes. Still looks pretty good. All right, most of it is out, but I'm gonna go ahead and give this another minute or two until it really gets close to stopping from dripping. And then I always put the drain plug back in first and put the filter back on. I am gonna clean this up. Always good to have some blue towels available to clean all of this up around where the filter goes on just a little bit. While the last remaining bits of oil drip out of the drain plug, I'm gonna go ahead and get the new filter ready. So I took off, of course, the plastic covering, and then you'll notice that it has this washer. Make sure that it does. If it doesn't, you're gonna have a mess. This one seems to be pre-oiled and ready to put on. However, if yours is not, just dab your finger in the oil and run it around the perimeter of the washer to make sure that it just has a little bit of moisture to it. I love the word moisture. And that way when you put it back on, it makes a nice, good seal. When I'm putting the new filter back on my motorcycles, I hand tighten them. And I hand tighten them just about as hard as I can, but I never use a wrench or anything else. I have found that this works best for me. Of course, after I have finished the oil change, I start the bike, and you got to do that anyways. Just want to make sure that there's no resident oil leaking out of your filter, of course. So you always want to make sure that you do that. After I get the filter on, which I have here, I feel pretty good about how tight it is. I'm gonna go ahead and clean underneath again just one more time with a blue towel to make sure that there is no resident or residue oil there when I test it. That way I can make sure that it's good. And it looks like it's just about finished draining as well. Hey, before you put that drain bolt back in, make sure there is a crush washer. Whoops, I just knocked that one off. So this is the factory washer. Looks like it's still in pretty good shape. A lot of guys may actually replace this every time. I'm not going to. I've found that I can get maybe 2 or 3 oil changes out of them. Not like they're a big ticket item. So, you know, do what you feel like is best in your situation. With the bolt just hand tight, of course, you've got to tighten that up pretty good, unlike the filter. So, which I hand tightened. So with this, of course, you want to use a torque wrench. You know, for the cost of one oil change at the dealer, you can buy most of these tools. This torque wrench, I got off of Amazon, Tecton. It is fantastic. Of course, the big thing to know about a torque wrench is once you set it and use it, you always want to take it back to 0. Otherwise, it really won't be as effective after a while. The spring will wear out. So great device for you to use. I've got this set at 32 pound-feet, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten it down until it clicks. And there you go. It's not really as much as you might think, and you don't want to over tighten it, or you could risk stripping out the bolt. Okay, with everything buttoned up, it's time to put some oil back in. So the oil fill plug is right here. So take that off. Try not to get anything on that. Don't let it get dirty. Set that aside. And then use a filter. Just so happens that my grandpa gave me this many, many years ago. He's been dead for many years. So it's always nice to be able to use a tool that my grandfather used. So you put that in, obviously, and fill her up. Now, one key mistake that I made here is I bought a gallon jug, and I knew that I shouldn't have done it. I bought a gallon jug full of oil. You know, this takes 2.75 quarts. So thank goodness I already had some quart bottles, and you could pour these into the quart bottles if you had some empty. It's a lot easier to do that than it is to try to figure out how much of the gallon you use, 2.75. There is a sight glass down here, and the sight glass currently shows everything empty, and of course the bike is on its side stand, not a center stand. I don't have a center stand for it. I'm debating whether or not I even want to put one on. But what I recommend doing is putting in what is recommended as far as the amount of oil, or maybe just a little bit less, and then starting the engine. And you want to do that especially if you've replaced the filter. And the reason you want to do that is because if you just pour oil in, it won't fill up the filter. So when you start the engine, and you only want to start it for a few seconds, that allows the oil to fill up the filter and do everything else, get distributed, let it sit for a while, and then recheck the sight glass. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead now and pour 2 and at least a half quarts in here. If not, if I can get close to the 2.75, and really what does that mean, then I'll go from there. Of course, you can do this in liters as well, which may be a little bit more accurate. Most of these bottles anymore are marked both in metric and standard, so it might be a little bit easier to do it from a precision perspective. And of course, there's a little sight strip on the side of the Yamaha as well. Makes it a little bit easier. Oh my gosh, I just realized this is for mature audiences only. Don't allow your children to see this. Here's how you hold a bottle with one hand into your filter. I do always take just an extra minute or two and let the final remnants of the quart come out. Don't know that it makes that big of a difference. I just asked Siri what 32 times 0.75 is, and she said it's 24. That's because I'm old and lazy and I can't remember how to do math in my head. Well, 32 ounces equals a quart, and so 24 ounces is how much more that we need in the bike. Of course, you don't want to go down to the 24 ounce hash mark. You want to go down further than that. So 32 minus 24, of course, is 8. Ta-da! I'm down to almost 16 now. And do this slowly, guys, because if you overfill, that is a major pain in the butt. You have to drain the oil to fill it again, or try to just let a little bit out. And of course, leaving a motorcycle or any vehicle overfilled with oil increases oil pressure and can cause gasket issues long term. That's pretty doggone close. I think I'm gonna stick with that. Carefully put your filler cap back in. Make sure you didn't get any debris or anything else in there, and hand tighten that pretty well. Now you're ready to start the motorcycle. Let the oil circulate a little bit, and of course fill up the filter, and then we're going to let it set so we can check the sight glass and see where we are. There are 2 different hashtags on the sight glass that you want to be in between, and you can see them right there and right there. So we want to be between those. And it's not necessarily better to be at the top one or the bottom one. You just need to be between them. Sheepers! If you cleaned at the bottom of the drain bolt as well as the bottom of the filter earlier, now would be a good time to just inspect those quickly and see if you've got any leaking going on. I'll use this time while I'm waiting for the oil to settle back down into the crankcase and check the sight glass to clean up all of my mess. Don't forget to keep those empties for future use if you did buy a full gallon. Everything's been cleaned up, so I came back to check the sight glass and see where I'm at. And as you can see, I'm between the 2 hash marks, over on the left or on the right. So the level is right below the top hash mark. I would not stress out about getting this right on the level. There's plenty of oil in there. The manufacturer allows that little bit of a discrepancy between these 2 hash marks for your level to exist. And of course, before you ever go out and ride, you should check this every single time, kind of like you check your tire pressure, just to make sure that everything will be copacetic. And that is it. Enjoy riding.